Hello, hello. Welcome to today's session of Selling the Couch. I hope you are doing well, having an incredible day. So, so many folks are leaving social media altogether, or they're significantly pulling back, like I am on social media. One thing I've noticed is not everyone that is leaving social media is necessarily burnt out. Some of them are just the most intentional people in the room, and that's really worth sitting with. On paper, social media makes sense for therapists. The visibility, the connections, the content. But here is something I've noticed since 2015 being in this space. The platforms that promise community are often the ones that are quietly fragmenting us. We market nervous system regulation as clinicians uh, doing private practice, or if you're doing coaching on these platforms. But these platforms themselves are engineered for nervous system dysregulation. And I'll just share that again, which is we market nervous system regulation on platforms that are engineered for nervous system dysregulation. That's not a small irony, and that's a real tension that I know many of us are sitting with. I've watched a lot of therapist entrepreneurs build on these social media platforms, build massive social media followings, have opportunities for things like writing and speaking. But I've also seen the other side of this, which is a lot of therapist entrepreneurs burn out and just quit altogether. And if I'm being honest, I've felt it myself, this pull to perform, to post, to be present on every platform. In fact, when I first started selling the couch, I kept hearing this phrase, you have to be everywhere. And so I didn't have a background in business or marketing. So I thought being everywhere meant being on all these channels. So I was on Instagram. We had a Facebook group. I had a Facebook business page. I was doing the audio podcast. And for what I didn't realize is what it costs: focus, depth, the kind of slow thinking that actually produces good and long lasting work. Just a honest reflection on this, there were seasons where I was more shaped by my own feed than by my values. And that I think is what these social media platforms really pull for, right? The more content that we post, it's almost like that proverbial carrot that we're always chasing. So here's what I've come to realize: social media isn't a neutral tool, it's a shaping force. Cal Newport, who is a computer science professor at Georgetown, he has an excellent YouTube channel that I would definitely encourage you to check out if you love stuff like this. Has a really great framing when describing social media. He says these are attention extraction machines. So the question isn't efficiency, it's really identity. And what does this platform make me become? I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this, and I thought about three buckets. The first bucket is what social media actually does to a therapist's brain. The second point is what intentional people are actually doing. And the third point is the alternative is an absence, it's design. So, with the first point, what social media actually does to a therapist's brain, one is I've just noticed in myself, it trains reactivity, which is the opposite of presence, especially that skill of presence that we often need in the therapy room. It also rewards comparison, right? Whether it is the number of likes a post has made, or the number of followers, or something like that, which is the opposite of a grounded identity that I know many of us strive for. It fragments our attention which is the opposite of the deep work that so many of us want to do in the world. And so the big takeaway from this is the skills that social media builds are the skills therapy requires you not to use, which is a really interesting juxtaposition and something worth thinking about. The second thing I just wanted to share is what intentional people are actually doing. So there's a great video. Several YouTube folks have made videos in the last several months around this concept of leaving social media or re examining a relationship with social media. Matt Diavella has an excellent video on this, and he talks about not quitting social media out of moral superiority, but asking a different question. What do I want this platform to do for me? And is it actually doing that? In other words, what we're saying is we are reclaiming energy as a finite resource. And even just to be fully transparent, I've have shifted a lot of the quote unquote social media to LinkedIn writing. And as of this recording, I've been on LinkedIn for about 3 to 4 years. And over the last year, I've really pulled back on LinkedIn, many times creating one post a week, other times two. And that was a huge contrast to, I think at my peak, I was writing about 6 times a week. In fact, I remember there was one Saturday where I was waiting to get some like takeout food because we were hanging out with family. And while I'm waiting for the takeout food, I'm trying to figure out the optimal time to post on LinkedIn. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, Mel, is this really the life that you want to build? But it's an interesting thing because I didn't realize it at the moment, but the energy that it takes to not just post on these platforms, but to leave thoughtful comments and all of these. And now I will say there's another, as with most of these things, it's not so black and white. I think there's just a nuance to it. The big takeaway from this is leaving or limiting isn't about productivity hacks. It's about deciding who gets access to your attention. And so, one of the things that I've done over here over the last, I would say, about 8 to 10 months is I'm on LinkedIn. I'm typically there about once to twice a week, and I block off a 30-minute time spot where I engage, leave thoughtful comments, and then I disappear. LinkedIn is not on my phone. I actually have it blocked on my web browser as well on my phone, so I just can't even access it. The only place I access it is on my desktop, and then beyond that, it's not really present in my world. And what's been interesting is I've noticed that a lot of the energy, which I didn't realize in the moment was draining me, how much of that energy was getting drained, it's actually come back in a very thoughtful way. And then I can reallocate that energy into things that ultimately, matter, at least in this season of life. The third point is the alternative isn't absence, it's design. And again, just to be fully transparent, my one hesitation with recording a video like this was to be like, okay, you need to get off of social media. But then, to be like, someone look at me, I'm like, Mel, you're posting on social media, so you're telling me to get off. And what I, instead of thinking through is, it isn't absence, it's design. So you can still market without being consumed. What I have really been thinking about is what kind of content do I want to create that not only serves folks well, but also leaves a meaningful and lasting legacy. I've been really leaning into long form content, into slow content, into our email newsletter that we send out every week. And what does even intentional community look like? I don't have any free communities right now, but we have a community inside of Haven, which is our community for therapists building and growing on through podcasting, online courses, speaking, writing, and YouTube. And and that's very intentional because it lets me focus and do well and uh, build thoughtfully in a community like that, but then it doesn't consume and fragment all parts of my day. Here's a few kind of hard truths that I've realized. And again, the three buckets before we go to that next section is one is what social media actually does to a therapist's brain, two, what intentional people are actually doing, which is leaving or limiting. Isn't about productivity hacks. It's about deciding who gets access to your attention. And the third point is the alternative is an absence, it's design. So you can build an audience without handling them your nervous system as well. A few hard truths that I've realized is no platform owes you results, and you don't owe any platform your presence. Most therapists stay on social media out of fear of missing out, not because it's actually necessarily working. That's actually worth naming. I would say about 8, 5 to 8% of anything we've ever sold with selling the couch and with Quiet Builder have come through social media. The vast majority of it has come through our email list and in-person connections and trust and relationships with folks. I wanted to introduce something which I've been thinking about, and I call it the dysregulation paradox. So, which is we help clients build regulation, we market work on platforms built for dysregulation. So, I just wanted to name it that because, and to really just notice it in yourself and to figure out what you might want to do with it. Uh, a practical kind of framework, just three questions really to think about. One is, what does social media cost me? Really spend some time thinking about that. For me personally, it's time, attention, it's emotional residue. That emotional residue, I think, was particularly powerful when we had previously had a Facebook group that was almost 10,000 members. And I didn't realize some of the quote unquote conflict that I would have to handle in that group would bleed over into other domains of my life. Like I would be stressed and not focused on, being present with my family because I'm thinking about something that happened. The second reflection question I would love for you to consider and think about is what does it actually give me? Uh, be honest, not defensive. Like, what is it actually giving me? And then the third question is if I remove the metrics tomorrow, would I still show up? These aren't necessarily like rhetorical. Really sit with them, journal about them, because I think it will help you uh, form a more coherent role with social media. The truth is, I don't have a clean answer. I'm still working this out as well. What I do know is that the best thinking that I've done, the work that I'm most proud of, didn't come from a scroll session. It came from slow mornings, it came from long walks, it came from conversations when I'm playing golf and conversations over lunch or coffee with people that I actually know. This episode, one of my challenges was I didn't want to be like, you know, anti social media. So it isn't anti social media. It's pro you, pro attention, pro the kind of work that actually lasts. And so I wanted to leave you with a final question, which is, are you on social media or is social media on you? So you don't owe the internet access to your nervous system. If this kind of slower way of thinking is what you're looking for, I wanted to tune you into two things. One is the free Selling the Couch newsletter. We send it out every week, just sort of reflections weekly on things like this, which is over at sellingthecouch.com/newsletter. And if you're a quiet builder and you love this idea of like building thoughtfully and intentionally, we actually have a very low cost newsletter. It's $97 a year. It's over at sellingthecouch.com/quiet builder, or just go to quietbuilder.com and you can sign up. And I send out 2 emails a month. The way that I think about them is guideposts for how to operate in a world that seems more and more fragmented and busy. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye.